he said, why are you crying? It was written on it, Java. I said, look, these are our oranges, and the Israelis took them.
At the United Nations in New York, the actions of the Palestinian guerrillas were being firmly condemned.
However understandable and even justifiable some of the grievances of the perpetrators may be, their acts are savage and inhuman.
At the United Nations, the Security Council called for the release of all hostages.
Israel's Prime Minister, Golda Meir, was also holding out for the release of hostages of all nationalities on all the aircraft. And she urged the British government to resist exchanging Layla Khaled for British nationals only. And pressure was also mounting on Edward Heath's government back home not to cave in to the hijackers' demands.
This is the BBC World Service from London.
Somebody had a shortwave radio, and so on the hour, every hour, they got the World Service, BBC World Service. We would all kind of crowd round and listen to the news headlines.
Whoever it was from the government making statements that we do not deal with terrorists and we can't give in to hijackers.
There was a suggestion that there were deadlines being set by the guerrillas for the release of Layla Khaled.
Edward Heath was the Prime Minister at the time, and them saying, oh, no, we're not going to release Layla Khaled, and we were going, oh, what about us?
We heard at one point that we had 14 hours before we were due to be liquidated. A word I don't hear very often, and it still sends chills down my spine now.
There were one or two of the guerrillas who seemed to me at the time much more fanatical.
One was a woman who very quickly became nicknamed Lady Macbeth.
She was a vindictive, vicious, spiteful woman. She said, tomorrow you die, we blow up the airplane. I didn't feel too happy about that, especially seeing they'd been loading boxes of explosives in the wheelbase.
But for the children on board, the gravity of the situation was barely apparent.
I suppose it didn't seem quite real to them, and they'd come up to us and say things like, are we going to be shot at dawn, which used to terrify me.
We got blankets out and we turned it back into a tent. I said to them, well, we're out in the desert, so we might as well live like Arabs.
They were telling us about the cause, and obviously we were asking them why they'd done it.
I remember them saying, oh, you can come and join us and we'll teach you how to fire a weapon and all this. I said, oh, I'll come and join you. Sounds great, isn't it?
They said they'd take us swimming next time, so it's very kind of them.
I remember one little boy called Omar, who had a pistol on his hip and a Kalashnikov. He was 13. He came onto the plane to play with the children. Yeah.
I bet him some cigarettes as to whether I could strip it down. And he said yes. And he just handed the whole weapon to me with the magazine on, fully loaded magazine. I did manage to do it, and I did just about manage to put it back together again. And then we had a cigarette together.
3 days after their arrival in the Jordanian desert, the women and children from the BOAC flight were released.
I asked the stewardesses to ensure that the children were properly dressed, that they had their shoes and socks on and all their bits of baggage, the things they needed with them.
I remember looking back and up towards the aircraft and seeing the doors filled with all the men left behind.
And I can remember seeing the children driving away, and I could feel all of that starting to go. I could feel I was really close to tears at that point. So I went back to being the steward. I got everyone up and we cleaned the aeroplane.
The convoy was soon arriving in Amman at the Intercontinental Hotel.
As the passengers left the camouflaged trucks supplied by the Royal Jordanian Army, they pushed their way through a barrage of soldiers, press and friends into the Intercontinental Hotel, where over 400 people waited to receive them.
Inside the actual foyer, in this scrum, I suddenly grabbed and spun round, and I found myself in front of a camera with a light. And this chap said to me, he said, right, you're on ITN.
What was the worst part of it?
Oh, actually coming to the place. And when they took all our bags off, we thought they were going to blow the thing up. We were very scared then.
You really thought that? What did you do?
We just sat there.
All the embassy wives had been obviously told, go to the Intercontinental Hotel and retrieve all these tired and emotional children. You'll probably have to cut this, but one of my abiding memories was one of these wifeys in her wonderfully, now, girls, does anybody want any of these? And holding up a Tampax. And we're going, oh dear. No, does anybody want any of these? I remember my friend and I going, oh dear, I can't believe this is going on.
We did some remarkable interviews with people getting off the coach when they arrived at the hotel. But there was one particular lady who was absolutely graphic about what had happened out there just before they'd been released.
You say they mean what they say. What have they said?
Well, we've seen with the stuff they've put on the plane.
What
It's
is that?
loaded with dynamite. There's dynamite in the cockpit, they've put it in the undercarriage, and everything. They have treated us very well. I must add, we've had no ill treatment, and they've been really nice to us. But they're desperate men. They feel they've been done a wrong, and to get their ends, they will do what they say.
I could see with the binoculars that the guys were finishing the wiring and the packages and inside the plane. And so when they finished, they moved quickly with their jeep far away from the planes and gave that light sign, which means, by remote control.
I'd had a nap on the settee in the afternoon on the day that they blew up the aircraft. My son was watching it and woke me up and said, "Mum, quick, look, they've blown up the aircraft." But didn't tell me that they'd taken their passengers off first. That was rather a tearful moment.
Bits all over the place, flying through the sky. Jet black smoke.
It was quite a sight. I can remember stupidly wondering what had happened to my suitcase.
The blankets we'd folded up and the seats were all up in the right place and it looked quite tidy, yes, and boom, it all went up in smoke.
We were glad that we weren't on it.
The bits and pieces settled in a radius probably of 20 kilometers or 10 kilometers. Smoke, what do you know?
The British men, along with male passengers from the other planes, were then driven in a convoy towards the capital.
As we approached Amman city, I can remember I was looking back for some reason.